Geralt of Rivia is a unique and interesting character that has a number of very interesting and defining moral stances from the books all the way through into the games. One of the quests in The Witcher 3 that puts this to the test is Reason of State, a much criticised quest by fans. Why? Well, let's talk about it today. Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel once again. Sorry for the lack of uploads the last couple of months. I've been moving house and had lots of life stuff going on, so apologies for that. I'm back today with a guilty pleasure of mine, the quest Reason of State. It's quite rightly criticised by fans for being slightly incomplete, among other things, but I think because I have a background of studying politics, the quest itself still appeals to me. Today I'd like to talk about what actually happens in the quest as well as how you get it, because it's quite easy to miss, and also discuss the quest criticisms as well as why I believe that Geralt himself would avoid this quest like the Catriona Plague. Let's get into it by starting to talk about the quests leading up to Reason of State itself. So let's start with the first quest in this series of them, A Deadly Plot. A Deadly Plot is set after the final Triss Merigold quest completes, which is called Now or Never. On the docks, Dijkstra will invite Geralt to the Passiflora for a meeting as he needs his help. At the meeting, Vernon Roche and Dijkstra request that Geralt tracks down their spy who has gone missing near the Rudanian border post. After talking to the contact, Gregor, Geralt then must find a shoemaker's wagon as the spy has been using this as his cover. It transpires that a group of trolls has actually asked the spy turned shoemaker to make them each a pair of shoes, and in a humorous interaction the spy turns out to be none other than Talar, who was in the first Witcher game. To let Talar escape from the trolls, you can either kill the trolls or just convince them to let him go by making up some elaborate plan about how he needs to go and get a lot of leather for their huge troll feet. Following that, you must then escort Talar back to his wagon with dialogue between the pair about what Talar has been up to since they last saw each other 2 games ago. Once that escort is completed, this completes the quest, and this is the first prerequisite for Reason of State completed. The next 2 quests that are involved are An Eye for an Eye and Redania's Most Wanted. These quests are included as a part of the Assassin's group of quests, but you can technically fail them or leave them incomplete as long as you bribe Dijkstra with information in the quest Blindingly Obvious, which I will come to in more detail later. An Eye for an Eye involves helping Vernon Roche stop Vez from going rogue. Vez starts a guerrilla attack on some Nilfgaardians in a nearby town, and Vernon Roche and Geralt must rush to help her with the aim of saving her. Although either outcome, Vez living or dying, is possible for Reason of State to continue. If she survives, Roche will berate Vez and Geralt must make the choice whether the last remaining Nilfgaardian, who is spluttering and dying, should be finished off or left to live. Meanwhile, Redania's Most Wanted involves a request from Radovid, the king of Redania, for Geralt to seek out Philippa Eilhart, who, it might not come as a shock to you, Radovid really hates. Geralt therefore heads to the hideout marked on his map and finds witch hunters who are not happy to see him. Geralt heads inside to find any clues he can, using portals to navigate through the cave system until he reaches a lair guarded by a fire elemental. Once that's killed, he can find a broken megascope and retrieve its crystal before heading back out of the cave. When leaving, you have a choice, and this will determine what reward, if any, you get from Radovid. You can decide whether to give the witch hunters the crystal or not, keep it for yourself and end up having to fight them. You could also choose to not give the crystal to him at all and instead give it to Triss or Yen and have them analyse it instead, and be thankful that you did not let it get into Radovid's hands. For Reason of State the quest, you only need to find the crystal, you don't have to deliver it to Radovid specifically. The third quest is called Blindingly Obvious. In this quest, you must, along with Triss, find Philippa Eilhart, who it transpires was actually stuck as an owl thanks to an ex-lover. An ex-lover who imprisoned her and then was killed, and his estate shipped off and sold. Zoltan, everyone's favourite dwarf, had actually had her this entire time until prior to the quest, where he unfortunately, as is Zoltan's way, lost her at cards. As a result, Dijkstra now has Philippa, and when you head to his bathhouse to find her, all hell has broken loose, and Geralt must chase Philippa into the sewers and through, eventually creeping up behind her and capturing her. Once you capture her, you promise her that you're not there to harm her, you actually need her, and convince her to come back to the bathhouse. When you return, you then have the option to bribe him with information, rather than shove him and get aggressive. Geralt must bribe Dijkstra with information about Emperor Emhyr rather than using force if either an eye for an eye or Redania's most wanted were failed or incomplete. This then opens up the actual quest entitled Reason of State. As you can see, it's quite an easy quest to miss, but once available, it's very, very interesting. Completing this then opens up the Reason of State quest itself. Dijkstra will invite you to meet him at his warehouse in the docks. Upon entry to the warehouse, you are greeted by the three conspirators, Dijkstra, Vernon Roche, and Tala, who has finally returned. They reveal their plan to you to lure Radovid off of his boat by using Philippa Eilhart as bait. At this point, Geralt is able, if he would like to decline doing the quest at all, which in my opinion is what option, if Geralt was playing as Geralt, he would take. However, you can also accept however reluctantly you like, and if you do accept, they basically plan to lure Radovid to the bridge leading to Temple Isle, formulating the entire plan. Unbeknownst to the three, but eventually to Geralt, Philippa Eilhart eavesdrops on the conversation as an owl. Geralt then must go to Radovid's ship and convince him, using the ring, that they have found her. They then march straight to the bridge to Temple Isle. And when they get to the bridge, Radovid's men are ordered to secure the bridge, but also ordered to murder Geralt. But fortunately, Vernon Roche's ambush that lies in wait saves him. After fighting Radovid's men along the bridge, alongside Roche and the rest of the Blue Stripes, Radovid is eventually cornered at the end, which has been blocked off. Before you can get to him, Philippa appears. She blinds Radovid with a spell, as revenge, for her own eyesight loss, and then stabs him in the back, killing him, and then transforming into an owl and flying away. The rest, Vernon Roche and Vez, quite rightly stunned at what's just happened, make a quick getaway, before meeting at the agreed spot in Madame Irina's theatre. It is then revealed what the assassins had agreed with Nilfgaard, and the reason why Tala had made his way across the border was actually for rounds of negotiations with the Nilfgaardians to secure Temeria's freedom within the Nilfgaardian Empire. Thus, in exchange for Radovid's head, they had been negotiating a peace and a truce in which Temeria would become a vassal state to the Empire in exchange for Radovid's death and no further guerrilla activities against Nilfgaard. Hence, Roche's desire to stop Vez from harming the Nilfgaardians in an eye for an eye. After the reveal of this consequence, and that your co-conspirators have actually secured the future of their country, the future of their kingdom, Dijkstra reveals himself and suggests that the price for Temerian sovereignty is too high. He reveals himself and his plans, which differ greatly from what the Temerians believe. He believes the price of their truce is too high, while also questioning the legitimacy of their sovereignty under Nilfgaard. With Radovid dead, Dijkstra intends to become Chancellor of Redania himself and continue the war, uniting the northern realms, of which Radovid already controls at least two, under his banner. Obviously, Roche, Vez and Tala naturally disagree with Dijkstra's plan, but the group is also surrounded by Dijkstra's men, including Geralt. And this is where the player and Geralt's decision comes in. Do you A. walk away and let Roach, Vez and Tala be slaughtered, or B. defend your comrades and kill Dijkstra and his men? Whatever fate you decide for the co-conspirators concludes the quest and the quest line. Reason of State is done. So you might be wondering, if you've not played the quest yourself, what are the consequences of each choice? Well, on Reason of State itself, essentially your decision means that either Roach, Vez and Tala die, or Dijkstra dies. However, there is actually a much wider impact of this quest, and that is on the end of the game itself, with varying different options depending on which choice you chose. If you don't take part in the assassination at all, then at the end of the game the following will play. Owing to his superior tactics and leadership, Radovid defeats the invading Nilfgaardians, absorbing all of the north under him and turning it into a northern empire. In his new empire, Radovid spreads his witch hunts across all of the north, burning all non-humans, mages, herbalists, soothsayers and anything alien to humans. In Nilfgaard, due to dissatisfaction with the empire's failed wars in the north, Emir var Emrys was killed by internal conspirators and succeeded by Morvan Vorhis. Whereas, if you do help to assassinate Radovid, but you let Dijkstra kill the Temerian Patriots, the following will play at the end of the game. After Radovid's death, Dijkstra took control of the north and managed to defeat the Nilfgaardians. He subsequently unified the northern realms, transforming them into a powerful empire rivaling Nilfgaard. Dijkstra believed that, for long-term survival, modernization would be necessary. He began a campaign for industrialization, technological advancement, and strengthened the military, but also allowed magic in the north. Many of his liberal and progressive policies often contravened the will of the general populace, but they went ahead regardless. With Nilfgaard having lost the war, Emir var Emrys was again killed by internal conspirators and succeeded by Morvan Vorhis. And finally, if you choose to assassinate Radovid, but then save the Temerian Patriots, save Vez, Tala and Vernon Roach, the following happens. Left practically leaderless, the northern realms were ultimately conquered by Nilfgaard. However, Temeria became a vassal but sovereign state after negotiations with Nilfgaard during the war. While Kovir was left untouched after signing a peace treaty with the Nilfgaardian Empire during the days of the First War, after achieving victory, Emperor Emir initiated a sweeping purge to all those who opposed him, consolidating his rule over the empire. This is, of course, if you make specific decisions during the main quest also. However, if the ending you chose for Ciri's fate means that she becomes Empress, the following last line essentially changes. Afterwards, Emir ceded his throne to his daughter, Ciri. Those, therefore, are the three different consequences of your choices within Reason of State. Now, so I don't get accused of clickbaiting you, it's important for me to now talk about why Geralt would not himself participate in this quest. And by that I mean, if Geralt was the player playing as Geralt, which is quite an interesting concept to think about, why would he immediately reject taking that quest? I think it's for the following reasons. In my opinion, Geralt tries his best to operate with neutrality where possible. Now, this is not a blanket rule, and in fact Geralt finds himself influenced and influencing politics quite often in the books and the games. But I think naturally he would actively try to avoid this quest where possible, and would be particularly likely to turn it down when given the opportunity in the dock, in the harbour. The clues to this really are, both from Geralt's character through the books and the games, but also heavily hinted at in at least the journal entries that, an older Dandelion writes about the stories within The Witcher 3. They all focus around neutrality and showing it to be central to Geralt's perception of the world. If anything, it would be more likely for Geralt to unintentionally contribute to the quest accidentally, as throughout his story he tends to constantly make decisions that have unforeseen political consequences, particularly in the books. In fact, if you chose to tell Dijkstra the intel that triggers Reason of State, the intel about Emhyr potentially ceding the throne to Ciri, this is a literal example of Geralt influence in politics when all he really wanted was to free Philippa Alha from Dijkstra's grasp. And so that in itself is an example of Geralt inadvertently abandoning his neutrality to give key intel to the opposition, to the other side. I think the only reasons that he could really be persuaded to complete the quest and to kill Radovid is because of Triss and Yennefer. Whoever you decide to romance in the story and whoever you think is right for Geralt in the end, they are both sorceresses. Radovid is an obvious and clear threat to them, as well as to Ciri most likely too, should he live. So it's natural, I think, for Geralt to want to defend that, and Dijkstra even plays into that in the game itself. Another reason could be that Geralt would get involved is potentially because between the books and the games there has been a shift in his character. Obviously, the ending of the books is somewhat final, but the game character has developed in a way, through the second game, which is all about assassinations of kings, and so perhaps there's been an alteration in Geralt's character through that time, potentially when, spending time with Vernon Roach, for example, in that game. His political involvement has amplified significantly within the games, and so perhaps this is a character development from Geralt in the books upwards into Geralt in the games being a much more politically active and less neutral character as a whole. That's something for you to debate with your own actions within the game, whether you take this quest at all or influence politics whatsoever, and how you as the player play as Geralt. With that in mind, I'd like to touch upon why I think, although there are definite flaws to this quest, it's still one of my favourite ones. I think there are several reasons for that. The first is I think that, as I was saying in the previous section, Geralt is very much trying to preserve his neutrality, so he himself wouldn't necessarily take this quest, but it's interesting to push the character out of its comfort zone and influence more than perhaps Geralt himself would want to. I think also the game giving you influence and impact on the state of the world is very interesting. I think it's very bold of the game to allow you to not only decide, Ciri's fate in the end, as is the ending of the game, but the state of the entire world is quite an interesting one. Whilst also within the quest itself testing the relationships that Geralt, or the player playing as Geralt, has with different characters, for example with Vernon Roach, Vez and Tala, as well as Dijkstra. One player who played through The Witcher 2 and played through Vernon Roach's story in that game is probably more likely to tell Dijkstra to sod off and save Roach, because they have a bit more of a connection to that. But when I first played through The Witcher 3, I'd never met Vernon Roach before. I had as much information as the game had given me up to that point, and so perhaps I would make a different decision. I might be more allied to Dijkstra, I might have saved his gold and enjoyed the banterous rapport that he has with Geralt. Or on the other side, I might have found him to be obnoxious and a bit of an asshole, and then decided to save Roach regardless. Or if I'd played The Witcher 1, I will have met Tala, so I know a bit more about Tala and want to save him. I think there's definite interest to that. I think it definitely could have been executed better, and there are definitely things missing in the quest, but from my perspective, the influence, as a bit of a politics nerd too, is being able to influence the state of the world at the end is very interesting. And I think also that my preferred choice is to save Roche and Vez and Tala, but I think the outcome for the state of the world that is better is definitely for Dijkstra to survive and to be the King of Redania, because it seems to benefit the Northern Realms and uplift them to a state where they rival Nilfgaard, which would potentially save wars in the future, if that makes sense. So I think it's interesting that on a personal level, Geralt's choice may have an outcome that is not necessarily the right one. I don't think that Nilfgaard should control the entirety of the continent, but that's the outcome that almost is forced upon you because you're more likely to side with Roach than with Dijkstra, and I think that's a clever part of the quest. So having covered now the reasons why I still quite enjoy this quest even though there are flaws, it's now time to address and talk about some of the flaws. There is definitely some videos on YouTube already that really describe the flaws in this quest very well and articulate it actually better than I think I can. So I will link a couple of these in the description if I can find them again, because they pop up in my recommended all the time, as I hope this video will pop up in yours. But to summarize really what I've seen and read, it's criticized because the quest itself just does seem incomplete. When you play through it, you'll feel that too. It feels very rushed, like things progress very quickly. In fact, the reason of State Quest itself, if you ignore the prerequisites, is actually very, very quick. It's literally meet at the dock, go to his ship, run to the bridge, and then it like takes you to the theatre afterwards. Feels like there should be much more to a quest that is literally about assassinating a king and influencing so much about the world at the end of it. Feels like there's definitely something lacking or something missing. It seems clear to me that there is definitely some cut content. The quests themselves, even the previous three, if you include the prerequisites now, the previous three feel very disjointed. And that's why the quest is so easy to miss, I feel like, because there's something missing that's linking these quests together and building up this story about assassinating Radovid. It should be bigger. If I compare it to another quest that I really enjoy, and perhaps I'll cover at a different time on the channel, the Skellige questline of influencing who is the leader of Skellige. I feel like those quests are really, really well linked together, and the quests flow in a way that makes it clear what impact your choices will have, and also, you know, flow in a way that is not just go here, do this, go here, do that, and oh, you've assassinated a king at the end, if that makes sense. So from that regard, I understand the criticisms of the quests. As I said, I still enjoy the quest, and I think that's more because of not what the actual quest entails itself, but in fact the implications and influences and thinking about the different options that it opens up for the ending of the game, basically. Another criticism that I've seen is definitely a valid one. I think that Dijkstra acts very out of character here. I think it's bizarre to me, as it is to others, that he would turn up himself at the theatre to announce his plan and not expect it to go badly, or not expect himself to be in danger or his life threatened in any way. I think it's a miscalculation that Dijkstra as a character, both in the books and the game, would never make. It just doesn't fit at all. And so there is that glaring issue, but I don't think that was intended to happen, but it happens. So I can't praise the quest for doing something that it didn't do. I think they definitely missed a trick there, and that Dijkstra should have potentially sent his thugs to try and kill them, and then there's something at his bathhouse. I don't know. I'm not a quest writer, but I would say there's definitely a way that it should have been done, and there's definitely something missing there too, because Dijkstra just wouldn't act like that. And I think it would have been more interesting then to have an eventuality that allows for Dijkstra to still take over the north, but Temeria to still be a part of Nilfgaard and be a free sovereign state. I think there's definitely could have been even more options, and perhaps that was too time consuming in the development or whatever. Again, I'm not a game developer or a quest writer or anything, so I don't know the specifics of that, but it feels like it is lacking slightly in that area, and Dijkstra's character would not make that kind of decision. And the problem is, it would be fine if you were a new player and it didn't show you that. The game shows you how Dijkstra is and what his mannerisms and his actions and his thoughtfulness and his planning is. You know, he's an intelligence officer, right? He won't make mistakes like that. and yet he does, and the game has already shown you do that, him to do that. So I think there's definitely that element as well. To summarize and conclude then, I would say that Reason of State is a flawed but a very, very interesting quest. And I think my assessment is correct that Geralt himself, playing as Geralt, would likely avoid this quest himself where possible. As I've discussed, the politics nerd in me kind of secretly loves this quest, but also understands that it's flawed and could have been so much more, and the potential is really there. It's clear that it's unfinished and could have been so much more. I think it's still to be praised insofar as that it's bold for the game to let the player impact the state of the world like that, the ending of the game. For me, it kind of indicates that it's pretty clear that they weren't necessarily intending to make a Witcher 4 at the time that they released The Witcher 3. I think they thought that would be the end. But obviously they are making a Witcher 4 now, so how they reconcile what has happened in The Witcher 3 and the endings of the game that each individual player will have will be very, very interesting to see how they manage to do that. That really concludes my video on the Reason of State, the Witcher 3 quest that Geralt himself would not take and would not do. A quest that influences the political state of the entire world at the end of The Witcher 3. Impressive. And with that, I have nothing left to do but say thank you very, very much for watching this video. It's really been appreciated. I am hoping again to be putting out Witcher content every weekend for this month. Every Saturday there should be a new Witcher 3 related video, or Witcher related minimum video, every Saturday for this month of May. So look out for those. Check out my video essay if you haven't already. And otherwise, all I can ask is that you please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and also like it too. It will really help. And I'm back. So thanks very much for watching once again. Like, subscribe, and peace.
You've had your fill of politics, I understand. Once it's over, come to Vizima. You'll be received with honors. Farewell, Wolf.